All right, well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining Acadia Center for our webinar on the Community Energy Vision Action Guide for Maine. My name is Krisha Wozni, and I am Communications Director at Acadia Center. On the line with me today is also Kathleen Neal, Policy Advocate out of Acadia Center's Rockport, Maine office. Kathleen is part of the team that developed the action guide, and she will walk us through it today. I'll be on the line to coordinate Q&A throughout. If you have a question at any time during the presentation, please type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you have any issues, you can type them into the chat, and I can try to take care of any logistical problems. Today we'll plan to tackle questions about the action guide itself during the webinar. However, if you have more targeted questions about individual policies, we would ask that you wait until after the webinar and get in touch with us, and we'll dig into those a little deeper with you. And with that, I will give the floor to Kathleen.
Thanks, Krisha, and thank you everyone who is on the line this morning. Acadia Center is very excited to share its latest piece of work with you this morning, the Community Energy Vision Action Guide for Maine. The Action Guide grew out of the series of work that Acadia Center has been producing, beginning with EnergyVision, to showcase how the Northeast can shift to a clean, consumer-friendly energy system. We see that vision here. Rooftop solar and wind producing renewable energy, electric vehicles charging and zipping around town, energy storage located in efficient homes and businesses, all of it drawing on market-ready technologies that produce deep emissions reductions and help maximize the economic, environmental, and public health benefits. This slide here comes from Acadia Center's Community Energy Vision report, which focused on the changes needed to advance strong, sustainable community energy. The Energy Vision series also includes Utility Vision, which provided additional detail for the electricity sector reforms and opportunities needed at the utility levels. And all told, the work sets out a pathway for ambitious, achievable advances in 4 key areas: energy efficiency, renewable power, electrification of buildings and transportation, and grid modernization. And those allow communities to really take control of their energy systems and to reform the way energy is planned and managed. Today, we'll take some time to walk through Acadia Center's latest report, the Community Energy Vision Action Guide. We'll go through the action guide, including its context, its components, and its potential uses for state and local action. And then we'll transition into a discussion of the specific actions communities here in Maine can take to advance clean energy. As Acadia Center's Maine lead, I have some ideas about that, but I'm really interested in your experiences and insights and questions. And as Krisha said, if you want to share those during the presentation, you can type them right into the Q&A box, and we'll tackle those and any other comments towards the end. So without further ado, let's get to it. As Acadia Center developed the Energy Vision series, it became increasingly clear that communities are really the place where the clean energy future happens. They can benefit from new energy technologies that offer unprecedented access to affordable, resilient, local energy. And communities have great capacity to change behavior and establish new energy norms. Unfortunately, as you all well know, communities are also dependent on what state rules allow them to do. And those rules vary widely across the 7 Northeast states. At Acadia Center, we believe that communities deserve the freedom to act. Acadia Center prepared the Community Energy Vision Action Guide to explore the changes that are needed to allow communities to fully benefit and participate in a sustainable, low emissions energy system, and to achieve that modernized energy vision that we're all thinking about. Those changes are going to require alignment of the community energy opportunities with state laws and rules. And they'll also require modernizing outdated rules that are currently blocking community action. Those changes will require community support. And so with that context, Acadia Center identified a few key goals for the Community Energy Vision Action Guide. The guide is designed to raise awareness of existing opportunities and obstacles to community energy. It's a user-friendly resource that's based on extensive research of the laws and the regulations governing community energy in each of the Northeast states. And by identifying barriers to community energy, Acadia Center hopes that the Action Guide will inspire advocacy for the changes we need. So what kinds of options and opportunities are we talking about? Acadia Center identified 4 categories of community energy action that local leaders and advocates, both inside and outside of official government roles, can take to shape their community energy systems. They include how buildings use energy, how energy is generated, delivered, and purchased, how zoning and siting decisions can shape clean energy development, and how residents, businesses, and municipalities pay for it all. The Action Guide includes a comprehensive list of almost 40 clean energy actions where communities could theoretically have a high degree of control. And it includes 3 interlinking sections. There's an overview of the 4 categories of action, a comparison of the availability of those actions across the Northeast states, and for each state, a deeper dive into the specific rules and regulations governing those actions. Together, these sections will help users determine whether a given action is possible, limited, or prohibited under state rules, and it will offer the regional context and the state-specific considerations to help move forward. When state rules allow communities the full freedom to act, communities will have the complete set of tools they need to embrace a clean energy future. So how does it work? The Action Guide uses simple color coding to give users a clear sense of the status and the next steps for each community energy action. So users begin by choosing an action and then ask a series of questions. Is the action covered under state policy? Has it been done before? Is it replicable? And is there a clear precedent? And the answers help determine where each action stands under current state rules. A stoplight-like key identifies each action as green, yellow, or red. So Acadia Center identified actions as green when there were no structural barriers to action. There's clear legislative authorization or a clear precedent. The green actions are the ones that every community in a given state could take. But it's important to note that these actions haven't necessarily been adopted in every community or necessarily in any community. So green actions can be a sort of to-do list for communities. Yellow indicates a lack of clarity. Acadia Center identified actions as yellow when there were limitations or considerations that could hinder community progress or when there was just no precedent for action. These are the steps that may be possible, but communities definitely need to learn more because they may need to work for changes in state rules or laws. And it's best to think about the yellow actions as sort of a research project at this point. Red is a full stop. Acadia Center identified actions as red when they were clearly prohibited by current state laws or rules. These are the steps that are not currently possible. But these are also the areas that are really ripe for reform. And a red light could inspire communities to roll up their sleeves and engage in state-level advocacy. when you look at the full matrix of the regional status of each of these actions, you might at first be interested in the status here in Maine. But the regional matrix, by providing the broader context, will potentially spark a few aha moments. It lets you compare which actions are possible, limited, and prohibited across the region. And what you'll see is that no state stands out as entirely permissive or restrictive. So when you look on the columns, you'll see there's not a whole column of red or a whole column of green. And the balance of green and red in each column may surprise you. States that are widely acknowledged as lagging in the uptake of clean energy actions don't necessarily lack for opportunities. They may be unaware of their options, or communities may be unsure how to take action. You'll also note, looking across the rows, that fewer than a third of the actions Acadia Center researched and documented have the same status in all 7 states. And no action is prohibited across the board. There's no row of reds anywhere in this matrix. The bottom line is that communities have a variety of options under current laws, and there are also plenty of opportunities to expand those options and push for reform. We're going to dig into some of the actions that are permitted, limited, and prohibited here in Maine. But first, let's just pause and see if there are any clarifying questions about the overall structure of the Community Energy Vision Action Guide.
Thanks, Kathleen. I have a question here in the Q&A box. If anyone has any additional questions, please feel free to type those in now. First question here is, what surprised the research team most when they finished the action guide?
That's a great question, Krisha. Thank you. We were really surprised in working through this at the variety of levels of permissiveness across the region. There are a lot of actions that communities are already taking, and we dug into some of those case studies and model efforts that are happening across the Northeast. But what surprised us was that what's possible in one state and thriving is prohibited right across the state line. We weren't expecting that variety of status. And it really, I think, should give communities both a little bit of an incentive and a little bit of hope that just because something is not possible right now where you are does not mean it's not happening somewhere else. And we are really hoping that the action guide will point you towards some of those places where community energy work is already happening.
Great, thanks, Kathleen. Another question here, how did Acadia Center select the actions to include? What were the parameters?
Yeah, we started with a big list of potential actions, and we dug in to see which of those were viable, which of them were leading to meaningful change, and which of those actions sort of coalesced into these key areas of advocacy. We tried to be comprehensive, but I'm sure there are other issues that will emerge over time. And we're not sure where this is leading in terms of a revisiting or expansion, and let us know if you have ideas.
Awesome. Those are the only 2 questions we had so far. So I think we can keep moving, and there'll be more time for questions at the end. So please continue typing those into the Q&A box.
Terrific. So thank you. Now that we've got a sense of how the action guide provides the regional context for the community action, we're going to dig into a little bit of the state specifics and walk through some examples here in Maine. Let's start with the clean energy generation, delivery, and purchasing category. When you look at this category, one possible action is to purchase utility-owned streetlights. The regional matrix shows that this is permitted here in Maine. It's a green light action. It's also permitted in Massachusetts and Rhode Island and New York, but it's limited in Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Vermont. Now for this seems like a pretty straightforward action, but for this and all of the actions covered in the guide, you can dig in to see exactly what that means. The action guide explains that Acadia Center asked whether municipalities can buy their streetlights from the utility. Typically, this is done to facilitate energy and cost-saving upgrades like LED lights. And the green signal indicates that for communities here in Maine, the answer is yes. And the action guide lets users know that utilities are required to offer multiple options for purchasing streetlights. So there's a clear path for communities to pursue this action and other green light actions. There may be more of an uphill battle for the yellow actions. So if we take a look at the buildings category, you'll see one possible action is to establish a minimum energy code for rental units. For this one, we asked whether municipalities are allowed under state rules to require that rental properties meet a minimum level of energy performance. The regional matrix shows that there's a clear yes in Vermont, but the answer is less straightforward in the rest of the Northeast states. Here in Maine, there are suggested efficiency standards for rentals. Those were developed by a stakeholder group in 2006, and that stakeholder group actually flirted with the idea of making those efficiency standards mandatory, but they couldn't quite coalesce around that. So they left them as suggested standards and recommended that the legislature revisit the issue. That hasn't happened yet, and as things stand now, there is no reason a municipality couldn't establish a mandatory energy code for rental units, but there's no clear authority to do so either. So the yellow signal indicates that you really need to learn more about this action and all of the yellow light actions before proceeding, because these efforts could actually invite some real pushback. You can anticipate pushback for the red light actions and be ready to engage in advocacy. If we look back at the clean energy generation, delivery, and purchasing category, you'll see another action is to develop a municipal microgrid. That involves working with developers and stakeholders to enable local energy generation, storage, and consumption with a microgrid that can add capacity and stability to the larger grid and can operate independently at times. Our neighbors in New Hampshire and Vermont have clear authority to take this action, but there's no path or precedent for community microgrids in Maine. I wanted to focus on this red light action because it's actually the time for state level advocacy is now. The legislature will be tackling a municipal microgrid bill in January, LD 257, sponsored by Representative Mick Devon, would enable municipalities to work with utilities to establish microgrids. And there are upcoming public hearings. There's actually something, they're doing a work session on Thursday morning. And those are a great opportunity to weigh in. So the red light actions like this one will, this has an immediate timeline for advocacy. Not all of them will, but all of the red lights signal opportunities for communities to expand their clean energy options. And when you look back at the matrix and see who's already doing this, where is it a green light? Can we learn something from our neighbors? That's the way the document works for all 37 community energy actions outlined and detailed in the action guide. You walk through the status and considerations for each action, And even if a particular action is prohibited here in Maine, you can see where and how it's been accomplished. There's a combination here of accurate, actionable information and inspiration for advocacy. Acadia Center hopes that the action guide will demonstrate how crucial it is to align community energy action with state-level reforms. By combining that regional context with the state-specific information for moving forward, the action guide will raise awareness of which actions can be taken now and build support for updating the rules and processes that govern the energy system. We anticipate a little bit of friendly competition between states as community energy advocates realize that their neighbors may have a different slate of available options, but also some real mentorship and community energy advocacy and partnerships. So our plans for the action guide, just so you know, we're engaged in widespread distribution to community and state level stakeholders. We're doing a series of state-specific webinars like this one to introduce users to the resource. And we'll be doing some outreach to spark coalition work on state-level reforms that will benefit all of us. I really look forward to collaborating with you on that work. My contact information is on this slide. And looks like we have a few questions that have popped up, and I will hand it back to Krisha to handle the logistics on that, and we'll dig in.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Kathleen. Yes, so we've had some questions come in and encourage you to keep asking. The first question here was asked while you were going through the yellow and red actions for Maine. And the question was, doesn't this depend on enforcement? And this person's a member of a planning board, and they, are always looking at how regulations are actually going to be enforced.
Yeah, there are a number of pieces of this, right? First, there's the state level authority that to take this action, but you're right, there is an enforcement issue. We're hoping that knowing where, the action guide has links to all of the relevant statutes. And if there's a green light action, it will actually spell out for you where that authority stems from. And that's a little bit of support when you're engaged in this work and if you're challenged on it. I'm not sure exactly what you're wondering about. Is it about a particular project, or Krisha, do you have any more?
Yeah, so she said specifically building efficiency in rentals.
Right. That is true. And one of the things that we're calling for at Acadia Center is making sure that there's enough support for code enforcement officers, for planning boards to actually enforce that. One of the issues that has made building codes so controversial in Maine is that that capacity to train and to support code enforcement at the municipal level has really been cut dramatically at the state level. So it's a process, and that authority, it doesn't mean that this will be easy. None of these are going to be easy, but you do have that pathway.
Great. Thanks, Kathleen. Another question, where can I go for more in-depth information on these actions? For example, municipal microgrid legislation. Does the Acadia Center have additional information on that?
So it's not built into the action guide at this point, but if you do have particular questions, my contact info is on here. Please reach out. I am actually going to be at the work session that the Energy Committee is holding on Thursday on the municipal microgrids bill. So I'd be happy to share any information about that. And one of the things that Acadia Center is really looking forward to is seeing which of these actions bubble up as really motivating communities. So if it's microgrids, great. If it's something else, if it's the rental units and how we get a coalition that helps build enforcement and support for that, this is in your hands now. And we're looking forward to being a resource and helping to connect each other. So if there's something you want more information about, let me know and we'll figure it out.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kathleen. Another question we captured earlier was, how does Maine stack up to the rest of the region?
It's an interesting question. We were surprised when we looked at, who seems like they're doing really well, who's lagging a little bit. It's not necessarily the way you would expect it to be. The regional matrix captures that Maine has a good slate of available options right now, and there's also room for improvement. So there are a couple of things that I think are big takeaways here. One is, if you are in a community that is not moving forward on some of those green light actions, this could be the incentive to say, look, these actions should be straightforward, at least legally. Doesn't mean that all community work is complicated. So it doesn't mean that they're straightforward to accomplish, but there are no structural barriers. Go for it. It also, at the next level, is an incentive to chip away at those barriers and expand that slate of green light options. I think Maine is in a pretty good place, and a very similar place to our neighbors in that we've got a mix of what we can and can't do, and we've got our work cut out for us in a variety of ways, but some good possibilities if you want to hop off this call today and say, I'm going to tackle this project right now. There's some place for you to start.
Excellent. Another question, are you aware of communities that have already taken some of these actions?
We are, and one of the things that the Action Guide team debated was whether we wanted to include case studies. We've included case studies in past reports, and they can be really helpful, but they can also be so specific to a particular community that they're not always, they don't always expand the options. So again, if there's something you're wondering about, you see, oh, purchase utility streetlights, I want to do that. Reach out to me. I've got a file full of who's working on that. I can connect you with folks who are already taking that action. It's just not built into the guide itself or the document itself.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kathleen. Any additional questions? We can give it another minute here, but it looks like we're getting close to wrapping up. In the meantime, we'd like to share that this webinar will be up on YouTube in the next couple days or so, and we will be sharing that information with all of you, and would encourage you to share the action guide as well as this presentation with anyone you think it might be helpful to. We do have another question here before we go, which is, which states already have voluntary green power programs in place?
Well,
we have to.
Action. Let's see. Is it on this one?
That might be the sort of, more specific question that we can certainly answer offline. You're welcome to look in the guide, but we have your question, so we can follow up with you after we're off today. I did have another question here about printed copies of the guide. So right now, this resource is available. You could print it yourself. However, if you'd like us to print one and send it to you, we're happy to do that. But it's really designed to be a downloadable, printable resource that you can take with you and use in a number of different ways. So please follow up with us on that if you would like some assistance. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this morning. And we hope that this action guide will be a resource you can use in your communities. And we look forward to partnering with you. Should you want more information, please reach out to Kathleen. You have her contact information. You can also reach out to anyone else here at Acadia Center, and we will put you in touch with the right person. As I mentioned, this will be available on YouTube, and we would just thank you again for joining us. Have a great day.
Thanks very much.